Social media provides a small window into a person's life. What they like, what they hate, who they admire, what they aspire to be, and more can be found on a person's Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Since its inception, social media has acted as a sort of online diary, where people share just enough of themselves to the world that strangers can watch them every day as entertainment. Over the years, curating one's social media presence has morphed into a job. Ensuring that one's aesthetic and style is perfectly manicured and the same between their Pinterest, Instagram, and YouTube can take hours, and many people end up in a sort of reality show of their own design. People watch their lives play out via their computer screens and feel as if they have some stake in the show. More often than not, these people only show the best of themselves. They only post when they are fully made up, filtered, and looking their best, hiding all the normal mess behind their cameras, and that was certainly the case with Alexis Sharkey. Welcome back to another episode of Dreading, or if this is your first time here, welcome. Today we are going to be covering the solved case of Alexis Sharkey and how her picture-perfect life on social media covered up a dark truth. This case came recommended by multiple subscribers, as many people feel as if this case, though solved, never got justice. This case also went viral before it was solved, and a large group of people never learned what happened. With that in mind, I have done my best to provide all the information that is publicly available, as well as request all the documents surrounding the case. Before we begin, if there is a case you would like to see featured on this channel, or a case you would like to bring more attention to, email me at dreading.official@gmail.com. If you're interested in supporting the channel, as the majority of my videos have either been copyright claimed by third parties or demonetized by YouTube, consider supporting me on Patreon. Recently, we have had a number of issues with YouTube, including our comment sections being shut down, as well as certain videos being taken offline, with us being unable to re-upload here. If that is ever the case, just know a copy will be placed on Patreon. With all that said, let us begin. Alexis was born Alexis Robinault in Warren, Pennsylvania, on January 25, 1994, and according to her friends and family, Alexis was just that type of person who seemed to draw others to her. Her mom, Stacy Robinault, stated that she had a sort of contagious energy about her. Alexis's younger sister would state that even though her and Alexis were complete opposites, and rarely did anything other than fight, that Alexis was the type of person who everyone gravitated towards, no matter what environment they were in.
We never were really close. We were just close enough in age where we kind of fought more than anything else once we kind of got to those teenage years. We honestly were kind of like fire and ice. Most people would joke that we were complete opposites. I ran up north to the cold and the mountains, and she went down to Texas where it's hot all the time. And we always used the joke that no matter where our parents wanted to go on vacation, they'd be able to go, whether they wanted to go to the hot or cold, because we were just so different. But no, she was so fantastic. She had a way of lighting up the room. When she smiled and when she laughed, she had a way to make everyone feel included. Like, you might not know her and you could be in the room and she'd see you feeling awkward and she'd come over and like pull you over to her group of friends and introduce you to people. And she was just such a light.
In fact, growing up with Alexis was a point of contention for her sister, as it appeared that Alexis got everything easier. Despite growing up in a small town where everyone knew each other, Alexis always talked about escaping. She wanted to travel, to see the world and experience new things, and she always talked about getting out. After graduating from high school, Alexis would go on to graduate with her majors in biology and psychology at the University of Pittsburgh, and was considering studying medicine. But, according to her friends at the time, Alexis was apprehensive about starting the next, and what she believed would be the final chapter of her life. She felt that by going to medical school, starting her career and planting roots in one area, she would be settling down for life. In her mind, a career was just a precursor to a marriage, and a marriage would lead to children. And if she was going to be a mom, she would no longer be able to do the things that she wanted to do. After talking to friends and family, Alexis decided that instead of going to medical school or getting a full-time career, she was going to spend the next couple of years of her life checking off things from her bucket list. She quickly packed up and moved to Odessa, Texas, and got a decent paying job as a bartender at Twin Peaks, a Hooters style of restaurant. That way her bills were always taken care of, and she had time to travel from state to state, experiencing all that the world had to offer. According to friends and family, this move to Texas really suited Alexis. She was able to establish a new home base pretty quickly, and made friends incredibly easily. Again, it seemed that people were always attracted to Alexis, and within weeks of her move, she had already made an incredibly tight friend group. However, after the move, Alexis would end up breaking up with her long-term boyfriend. The two had gotten engaged while in college, but after the move, Alexis began to realize that their life goals no longer aligned. Even though she was the one ending the relationship, she was heartbroken. She didn't know whether she made the right decision or not. She told friends that she felt like she was being selfish, but also felt like if she went through with the wedding, she would be resentful. Alexis still loved her ex, and felt that if they were meant to be together, they would find each other later in life. Despite going through a heartbreak, Alexis continued to travel and carefully curated her Instagram to only showcase her adventures. Alexis took her Instagram grid incredibly seriously. It was important to her, as it's important to a lot of people, to make her life look as flawless and aesthetic as possible. And through her carefully crafted Instagram feed, she began to get a healthy amount of attention. Slowly but surely, as Alexis posted glimpses of her life, more and more people found her, and found her to be aspirational. She was a confident young woman who spent her life traveling and trying new things, and many young women felt that she was living the life they had wanted. Her followers frequently used her posts about how she makes sure to stay organic while on the road, how she takes care of her hair and the makeup she used as a guideline for their own life. And though Alexis disliked being called an influencer, she was one. She was still working at Twin Peaks, traveling in her free time and trying to get over her heartbreak when she met Tom Sharkey. Tom worked as a consultant in the oil field and would often travel around the country for work, but whenever he was in Odessa, he would stop into the Twin Peaks to see Alexis. According to her friends and coworkers, the two immediately had chemistry, despite Tom being 23 years older than her. Tom seemed like an incredibly interesting person to Alexis. The fact that he traveled for work and had seen so much of the world intrigued her, and whenever he was in the bar, she would ask him about where he had gone to. Her genuine interest was refreshing to him, and after some pushing from her coworkers, the two would end up starting a relationship. From what Alexis posted on social media, Tom seemed like a nice guy. Friends and family described him as a gentle giant, due to the fact that he was over 6 feet tall and a bodybuilder. She began to showcase him more in her vlogs and Instagram posts, and each time he was seen as a nice, albeit physically imposing man. But how true that description was of him would remain to be seen. Alexis had grown her social media following organically to a couple thousand followers, showcasing her picture-perfect life, when she was approached to start selling for Monat. Monat's website described the company as a family-run wellness company whose ultimate goal is to provide innovative hair care, skin care, and other beauty products to the people. But in actuality, it's a multi-level marketing company who has been sued countless times for their products causing harm to their consumer. In March 2019, a federal report filed by the FDA after inspecting Monat's Florida manufacturing facility found that multiple products were prepared, packed, and held under unsanitary conditions whereby they may have become contaminated with filth. All in all, the company itself is rife with controversy, especially since it's run as a pyramid scheme. For those who were unaware, multi-level marketing refers to a strategy used by some direct sales companies to sell products and services. MLM encourages existing members to promote and sell their offerings to other individuals and bring on new recruits into the business. Distributors are paid a percentage of their recruits' sales. New recruits become the distributor's network or downline and are, in turn, encouraged to make sales to earn money. Basically, if I am working for Monat, not only do I have to sell the products, but I want to get as many people as possible to be in my downline, because the more people I have selling Monat because of me, the more money I'll make. If I can convince 10 people to sell Monat, I get a portion of their sales. And if I get people to sell for them, I continue to earn. This is unlike traditional sales channels. Multi-level marketing programs involve the use of networks for sales and to recruit new participants. Alexis would be seen as the ideal recruit for someone working for Monat because she already had a following who looked up to her and wanted her beauty recommendations. Her comment sections were filled with young girls complimenting her hair, asking her how she kept her hair healthy after bleaching it platinum blonde for years, and all Alexis had to do was shout Monat out one time to be profitable. Alexis began working for the MLM and was able to grow her following even further. She quit working for Twin Peaks, and her life appeared even more aspirational, with her her regularly going on Monat-sponsored cruises and vacations. She often posted about how working for Monat had improved her life in every way, how she felt it was the perfect job, and she told her followers that if they wanted to live like she was, going on cruises every year, all they had to do was sign up to sell Monat as a side hustle. Her relationship with Tom also appeared to be perfect, with her posting him often and writing about what a wonderful partner he was. In 2019, the two would get married and move to Colorado. Alexis spoke about this move on Instagram as being a big step for them and being the start of their next chapter. According to friends, she was ready to settle down a bit more and potentially start a family. Tom already had 2 children with a past wife, but Alexis wanted something of her own. They spent their time in Colorado going to national parks and landmarks, but after an incredibly short period of time, decided that they didn't want to stay. They didn't tell their friends or family why, but they said Colorado just wasn't the right fit for them, and they decided to go back to Texas. However, before they got there, they wanted to take a 25-day road trip through New Mexico, Arizona, and Utah. When the Sharkeys moved back to Texas, they settled in Houston. Tom already had friends living in the area, but once again, Alexis had moved to a place where she knew virtually no one, and given that she worked from home with Monat, she wouldn't be able to use work as a meeting place. Instead, she downloaded Bumble BFF in order to find women in the area who were looking for friendship. Through the app, she met Tanya Ricardo, and like she had with almost everyone in her life, Alexis immediately clicked with the mother. Tanya described Alexis as being incredibly kind and good-natured, and the type of person who would listen to someone without judgment. She was incredibly good at listening to others, often giving them the attention they were craving in order to feel as if they were being understood.
How long did you know Alexis? Because I know her mom said she recently moved to Houston.
Right. She moved here in January, and we met, within weeks of her moving here. I was kind of looking for a new group of friends, and I brought this group of friends together, and she showed up to this dinner. And since that day, she's just been part of our circle.
She's 26. I was telling you that I was scrolling through. It's kind of a deep dive. She just knew so many people. She was active. I was looking at this vacation that she and her husband had just taken, this road trip. She seemed bubbly and full of life to me. I didn't know her. How would you describe her?
Exactly like you did. She was always happy, always had a smile on her face. A lot of people looked up to her. She was just very, very positive, always very knowledgeable, knew a lot about what was going on, loved being an influencer, as you can see, and sharing, tips and tricks about makeup and hair and fashion. If we needed her for anything to do with that, she was the girl to go to, for sure.
How did you meet her?
We actually met on Bumble BFF.
Oh, I've used it before and I've never had success. So she was a girl's girl. She was looking for friends when you met her.
Yeah, she was looking for friends, and she definitely found people that really, really loved her.
Tanya quickly introduced Alexis to her own group of friends, and within a couple of weeks, Alexis had another close-knit friend circle around her. Alexis took friendship very seriously, and always made it a point to spend time with people outside of her relationship. When Alexis was added to a group chat with Tanya and their friends, she was always the first to respond to anyone's messages, both because she was always on her phone and because she wanted to make sure whoever was speaking knew that they were being listened to. But there was one strange thing that stood out to the group about Alexis, and that was the fact that she would rarely talk about her marriage with them. Alexis made it a point to never speak about Tom, which the girls felt was weird. Most of them were married or in serious relationships, and as such, would regularly discuss things that their husbands had done that annoyed them, or gush about how sweet they were being, but Alexis would never bring up Tom in any capacity. The only reason that they knew Tom existed was because he would come around when the girls would hang out, and from what they saw of him, he seemed fairly normal. He was loving and affectionate to Alexis, and made sure to treat each of her friends well, to the point to where they thought it was kind of weird that she wasn't more talkative about what a good guy he was. On a couple of occasions, he had surprised Alexis while she was hanging out with them, bringing her roses and gifts to let her know he was thinking of her. All the girls felt as if Tom was a really nice, genuine guy, and they couldn't understand why Alexis seemed to not want to talk about him. Then, in 2020, as we all know, the coronavirus pandemic hit, and like most of the world, Alexis had to quarantine with her husband. The pair was used to Tom traveling around the world and going off on small vacations together. However, for the first time in their relationship, they were stuck in close living quarters. Alexis began to post to TikTok during this time, sometimes posting about the Monate products she was using, other times just posting joke TikToks.
It's going to be a rule. I'm not following any boyfriend or anything because it's so awkward when I have to unfollow. He blocked me. What a f***ing loser. Literally, what a f***ing loser. I'm calling her right now. Your boyfriend's a f***ing loser. He blocked me on Instagram. Like, how old are you?
He's 27. Only 27-year-olds even know how to block. I don't even know how to block someone.
Oh, it's on.
Oh, no, please don't do the it's on. What does that mean?
It just means when I see him, I'm going to, like, spit on him. Whatever, I'll save it all for him. I won't stress you out.
No, please tell me, because I just have to know how long I have to keep you guys separated.
We can coexist. I'll be nice.
No, I don't know if you guys can coexist. It's so crazy.
Yeah, I don't think we can, actually.
You're right, Lise. You shouldn't go. It wouldn't be honest. I'll go, disguised as you.
What if he wants to hold hands?
I'm prepared to make that sacrifice.
What if he wants a kiss?
I'm prepared to make that sacrifice.
What if he...
You don't want to know how far I'll go.
Strangely enough, a good portion of her videos revolved around the idea of her husband being incredibly controlling, getting angry when men hit on her, and how he was incredibly protective of her.
Remember, I have a boyfriend.
Oh, for real?
Yeah.
I'm just thinking maybe we can be, you know what I'm saying, you can be somebody for me to know.
No, my boyfriend crazy. He kill people.
Oh, okay, all right. No, I don't want none of that right there.
Yeah.
All right, man.
All right.
The comments on the videos often stated that if she was being honest about these scenarios, it was a red flag, and she could be in serious danger. But Alexis tried to dissuade her followers and say she was just joking.
Babe, I'm gonna go to work.
Great. Remember what I told you, right?
Uh-huh.
If a guy asks if you have a boyfriend, what are you gonna say?
Yes, I love him.
If a guy tries to take you out to lunch, what are you gonna say?
No, I have a
If
boyfriend.
he tries to give you his number, what are you gonna say?
I'll give it to my
If
boyfriend.
he asks you who's the most handsome and sexiest guy in the world, what are you gonna say?
My boyfriend.
That's right. Go get him, Tiger. Go to work.
But Tom seemed to think these videos were funny and often took part in the sketches. She continued to post, gaining thousands of followers on TikTok, and in October 2020, she posted her final TikTok.
Molly rocks in my green tea.
At the beginning of November 2020, Alexis went on a trip to Marfa, Texas, with a close friend. Then immediately followed that trip with another trip to Tulum, Mexico, with a group of friends. Notably, Tom was absent. It was on these two trips that Alexis finally opened up to her friends about what had been happening in her marriage. On the trip to Marfa, Alexis told her friend that after a year of marriage, she wanted to get a divorce. She opened up about how Tom had been abusing her, and that whenever they would fight, he would strangle her until she passed out, then leave her on the bathroom floor. She claimed this happened multiple times over the years, and she had believed him when he said he would stop, but it had only gotten worse. She showed her friends the messages he'd been sending her while she was on the trip, calling her a whore, saying she was probably sleeping with other men, and saying how much he hated her. These messages were manipulative and controlling, mocking her posts online and tearing her down entirely. Alexis told her friends that their entire relationship had been like this, and that Tom often manipulated her in group settings, purposely going out of his way to look like the perfect husband. That way, if she seemed upset with him or made any claims against him, she would look crazy. She told her friends that on multiple occasions, he had shown up to their hangouts and surprised her with gifts. He had been trying to pressure her into forgiving him for hurting her, and it had worked. Alexis told her friends she wanted to leave Tom, but was scared of what he would do. She asked them to go out with her and take multiple trips, with the notion that he couldn't hurt her if she was away from him. She wasn't posting on social media quite as much, and she always wanted to, quote, be around her friends all the time to avoid going home. When Alexis got back from her trip to Tulum, she was back to living in a small apartment with Tom, and tried her best to get out as much as possible. But obviously, this angered Tom. He could sense that she was pulling away, and this led to more fights. Her mom had wanted her to come back to Pennsylvania for the holidays, as she hadn't been back home since she'd gotten married. She ultimately decided that she would go back home for Christmas, but spending Thanksgiving with Tanya and her family away from Tom. According to Tanya, the holiday was wonderful, as they played board games and ate all day. Then at around midnight, another friend picked up Alexis, and they went out to a bar. They stayed out until 3 a.m., with Alexis stating multiple times that she did not want to go home and see Tom. Once again, he had been sending her vitriolic messages all day, calling her a whore and saying that she was a dumb bitch. But at 3 a.m. the morning of Black Friday, Alexis was driven back to Tanya's house, where she picked up her car and drove back to her apartment. For any company, Black Friday is a big deal. Many companies have their biggest sales on Black Friday and make the majority of their profits on that one day. The same is true for MLMs and for the weeks leading up to Black Friday. Alexis was prepping her posts for Monat. However, she would never go on to post. Her social media went completely dark, with her not posting to her feed or story at all, which wasn't like her. She was one of the top salespeople at Monat, and for her to ignore the biggest sales day of the year, something would have to be extremely wrong. She also wasn't responding to messages in the group chat, which wasn't like her at all. Tanya would go on to tell the Daily Beast that, quote, "I instantly knew something was off. She has never been known to disappear or not answer her phone. I don't think we have ever gone more than 6 hours without texting." Another friend said Lex would never run off and she always had her phone, as it's how we ran our business. Her life was social media, so her phone was her life. However, at around 5:30 p.m., she would send out a text to her group chat, ignoring the previous messages that had been sent that day, and asking if anyone wanted to go out that night. Because of the holidays, they wouldn't be able to meet, but the chat all agreed to hang out the next day and have a chill girls' night in. Her text agreeing to hang out would be the last time anyone would hear from Alexis, and her phone would be shut off. However, if she had really been the one to send those messages, would be called into question. When Alexis stopped responding to their messages, her friends immediately began to worry. They knew that Tom was abusive, that he would strangle her to the point of her blacking out, and the fact that she hadn't posted on social media made them worried. They began to text each other outside of the group chat to figure out what they should do. They were worried about Alexis's safety, but they also didn't want to call the police in case that was what pushed Tom over the edge. However, as they came up with the plan to move forward, Tom texted one of Alexis's friend's boyfriend, a man named John, and asked him if he had heard from her. According to the text, he claimed that he and Alexis had gotten into a big argument, which resulted in Alexis hopping over their patio fence and jumping into a car and driving off with the occupants. John immediately called Tom, as his story made no sense, and from the start of the call, it seemed as if Tom was trying to set up his alibi. When John asked him what had happened, Tom went over everything he had done that day, and spent a good long while detailing things that didn't matter. Instead of focusing on what had happened the last time he saw Alexis, going over what she was wearing or why they were fighting, he was more focused on minuscule, random details. The call lasted for 45 minutes, and immediately after, John told his girlfriend that something was wrong. Tom would go on to call other friends of Alexis, though notably, none in her immediate close friends group chat. He would tell them multiple different stories about what had happened that night. To some people he talked to, he claimed that Alexis and him didn't get into a fight. Rather, she just got mad at him and stormed off out of the house, barefoot. She then jumped into a small black car and drove off. When asked for more details about the car, Tom stated that it was possible that she didn't get into a car and instead took off on her own. But when asked how she would go off into the middle of the night without shoes, he then said it was possible that she was wearing shoes, he just didn't notice. Initially, he claimed that she left without her phone, but when speaking to other people, he told them that when she left, he tracked her using the Find My Phone application. He then claimed that he had followed her for a while, driving behind her as she walked, but lost her as his phone lost service. By the next morning, he had called and spoken with multiple people, including Alexis's mom, and had told very different stories about what had happened. However, he did not call the police. That morning, as Alexis's friends got up, they became more worried. Alexis still hadn't posted to their group chat, and they weren't able to get into contact with her, and they knew something was deeply wrong. Eventually, Tanya went over to Tom and Alexis's apartment, but they found no one there. At this point, she knew something was wrong. Alexis wouldn't ignore her friends like that, and there was no way that she would go a day without posting to her Instagram story for work. While out front of the apartment, Tanya called Stacy, Alexis's mom, and was then informed that no one had seen Alexis that night. Stacy told Tanya Tom's insane story, how Alexis had jumped a fence the night prior after an argument and how she hadn't been seen since. Tanya knew that the story couldn't have been true. There was no way that Tom would have allowed Alexis to jump a fence during an argument, and given his violent past actions, she knew he was hiding something. According to Alexis, every time they had gotten into an argument, he had strangled her and physically overpowered her, so the very idea that he would let her get away was insane. But she didn't want to worry Stacy, especially if Alexis was alright. Despite her fears, she hoped beyond reason that her friend was okay, but she knew it wasn't likely. After speaking with Stacy, Tanya told the group chat that Alexis was missing and that Tom had been the last one to see her. and together they filed a police report. Whereas Tom had settled on calling people and asking if they had seen Alexis, her friends immediately jumped into action, creating posters, hashtags, and Instagram posts, spreading awareness about Alexis being missing. Alexis's case quickly got picked up by the media and quickly trended on social media, and as is usually the case, people began to give their opinions on what they felt happened. Alexis's TikTok was circulated online, and people began to point out how toxic it seemed her relationship was. In one TikTok, she captioned it, "My boyfriend kills people," and joked about how if a guy hit on her, he was as good as dead. People also found it strange how much of the search was being done by Alexis's friends. They had been the one to raise the alarm and file a missing persons report. Meanwhile, Tom didn't seem to take the case seriously. And given that some 47,000 women and girls worldwide were killed by their intimate partners or other family members in 2020 alone, many people automatically believed that Tom was responsible. However, by the time posts were being made and theories were being spread, a body had already been found. Alexis's body was found between 3 to 4 miles away from her apartment, and she was completely nude. Her body was completely clean, as if she had been killed coming out of a bath or shower, and her body was placed on the side of the road, posed in a degrading way. Before we go any further, it's important to note how Alexis was disrespected in her death by the man who killed her. When a person is killed, a lot can be gleaned about the feelings of their murderer by what is done with their body. In the case of Nancy Brophy, she wanted her husband to look as if he had been murdered in a random act of violence, so she left him to bleed out on the floor of the culinary school he worked at. In the case of Joel Guy Jr., he was angry at his parents, particularly his mother, so he dismembered their bodies and left his mom's head boiling on the stove in an attempt to destroy them. And in this case, whoever killed Alexis wanted to humiliate her one final time and treat her like garbage, so they stripped her body and left her on a very public road to be seen by as many people as possible. The amount of malice you would have to have towards another person to intentionally humiliate them in death is significant. Her body had been reported by a city worker in the area who believed the body was a mannequin. He believed that someone likely threw the mannequin out of the car and left it on the side of the road. However, he had a strange feeling about it and reported it to his supervisor, as he wanted to be sure if it was a piece of garbage. But when his supervisor came out to the scene, he found Alexis's body.
For John Richardson, it's a Saturday morning he'll never forget.
It plays back in my head. You know, it's been playing back in my head every day.
He was at work for the City of Houston Solid Waste when Richardson says he got a call from an employee.
He said he thought he seen a body or a mannequin, so he wasn't for sure. He wasn't going to stop because he was kind of, he was scared or whatever case may be. So he asked me to come out there and check it out.
So as his supervisor, Richardson went to check it out and still can't believe what they found.
As we was driving, we could see the feet, so we got out and looked, and there it was. She was laying there, deceased. She was no clothes on, and I just got on the phone and I called 911.
The family was contacted, and Tom was brought in to confirm that it was Alexis. After the confirmation, the police informed Alexis's family and the public that she had been found, deceased, and people quickly began to speculate about what had happened. The majority of people believed Tom to be responsible and made no qualms about saying so on social media. Tom initially responded by posting a collage of pictures of them together, alongside the caption of, quote, "Baby, please give me strength. Do you remember when we talked and joked about getting old? And I said, that's the one thing you would never beat me at. And we laughed so hard because you're so competitive," unquote. In some reports, that post was made prior to finding her body, which is notable, as he refers to her in the past tense. However, that fact was not confirmed. He made another collage, this time of Alexis in her wedding dress, and wrote, "You made life so incredible, made sense of my existence, my purpose, and showed me how to truly love." However, these both received some pushback, with some Facebook users accusing him of knowing more than he was telling police. In response to that sentiment, Tom wrote the following on Facebook, hours after confirming Alexis's body. "I just want to say this. While some of you were posting on social media, helping us locate my world, and we appreciate all your help, love, and support, others were wasting time talking about other things, basically crap talk. And if my wife would have seen this, she would be disappointed in your actions. You all should be ashamed of yourselves. I have been assisting the deputies and making phone calls to find out what happened to my wife. Next time, stop and think and realize you don't know it all." Stacy and some of Alexis's friends spoke to the media, and it seemed they were convinced that someone had killed Alexis.
She was a beautiful, fun ray of light to be around, and I can't understand it.
Her mom, Stacy Robinault, spoke to us by phone.
I think that's why it's so surreal for the family, because we cannot grasp on why harm would be done to her.
Saying even though it's been agonizing,
we're just trapped in the waiting.
They're just waiting for police to do their work.
I talk to the detectives every day, and they assure me that they are, working along, and that they are reviewing and talking to people. And so I know that they're working along. To me, 5 days feels like an eternity, and to them, I'm sure they're just, getting rolling.
Police still have not determined a cause of death in the case, but in her heart, Robinault fully believes someone did this to her daughter.
Can you, because you can't even wrap your mind around this, right? Like, what a 48 hours from Thanksgiving to Saturday. Can you even imagine who would have done this to her? Like, do you have a message to that person? They clearly tried to hide her body, and they disrespected her. I mean, just all of it so much. What do you say to that?
Whoever did this we're going to find them. We're going to do everything it takes so everyone can put her to rest in peace, and where we can get answers and just move forward. But no one gets away with something like this. No one. I mean, just threw her on the side of the road naked like garbage. I don't get it.
It's a lot of different things between like, I'm still kind of going through the denial of like, I know she's gone, but it hasn't fully set in yet. And then just a lot of anger that somebody took us from her so soon. Because I have this terrible feeling that it was foul play, and it hurts me so much, because she was just such a fun, happy person, like, who had so much anger in them that they could do this to her.
Despite the fact that her body had no visible injuries. In interviews, they were certain that someone had killed her, but maintained that she had no known enemies, and they seemed to be fearful of giving any hints as to who could be behind the murder. Whenever Alexis's friends or family spoke to the media directly, they were very careful to never directly accuse anyone of any wrongdoing or point suspicion at any person. When they were asked about Tom, they scared of the question and said they weren't willing to directly accuse anyone. However, shortly after her body was found, a number of articles were published with anonymous sources, which pointed to Tom being the one behind the murder. They called out the abuse, the changing stories, and they also discussed how Alexis was planning on divorcing Tom, to the point where their bank accounts had already been split, and all that was left to do was sign the papers. In these articles, they also stated outright that they felt the need to hide their identities for fear of retribution from Tom. It also came out that Alexis had begun to flirt with and talk to another man outside of their relationship. According to friends, Alexis had met this man while on her trip to Tulum, Mexico, and they had hit it off. She told him that she was in the middle of a divorce and didn't want to start anything before her marriage ended, but he had been the friend who she went to the bars with on Thanksgiving. Though it's uncertain if the two had gotten together physically, it was clear that for Alexis, her relationship was over. However, Tom denied all the allegations. In an impromptu phone interview with ABC 13, he once again changed his story and said that they had been happy together and that Alexis was just stressed from work and her friends, and that he was being unfairly blamed for the whole ordeal. He also claimed that he was the one to find the body, not the city workers. But then when he was asked for clarification from the reporter, he stated he meant that he identified the body. He said, quote, "It's horrible. People are talking tons of crap. I'm getting death threats and stuff. None of that bothers me. What bothers me is that the world and everybody in it focuses on all the stuff that doesn't matter. Should have been focused on finding my wife. Everybody was still looking for her, and I located her Sunday morning in the coroner's office. They couldn't ID my wife. They didn't know who she was just there." He did multiple interviews, stating that Alexis wasn't the nice, happy person people believed that she was, but was instead dealing with a lot of personal demons. He claimed she was stressed 24/7 and hated her life, and that he was the only person she could be herself with. Tom said her friends and family didn't know the real her, and that she carefully crafted the perfect version of herself in front of them. But that was obviously untrue. Alexis's friends responded in kind, doing multiple interviews to talk about the person Alexis really was, and how they felt like Tom was slandering her in her death. They stopped short of accusing him directly of any wrongdoing, but defended their friend. It wouldn't be until January 19th, over a month after Alexis's death, that the cause of death would be released, and it was found that she had been strangled, and her death was ruled as a homicide. Reports about Tom having strangled Alexis in the past had already spread, and the fact that the cause of death had been strangulation only made people more suspicious of him. However, the day prior, it was also publicized that despite Tom being listed as Alexis's next of kin and the only person who her body could be released to, he had left her body in the morgue for 2 months and never claimed it. After her body was found, he had agreed with Stacy that they should have a memorial service in Pennsylvania with her family. He said he would get the body and pay for it to be buried. That is, until he stopped speaking to the family outright. Tom would claim that he felt disrespected by Stacy and Alexis's friends, and felt like they were blaming him for Alexis's death. He didn't like talking to them because they were always making it seem like he was a bad person. So, in response, he refused to pick up Alexis's body and he refused to talk to them. He also left Texas and moved to Georgia without telling anyone. Stacy called the morgue and tried to get to the body herself, but as Tom was the only one listed, it seemed as if it was a lost cause. After 2 weeks, she had given up hope of being able to bury her daughter, when the morgue decided to break protocol and change Alexis's next of kin. Before Tom moved, he had been asked to give a sample of his DNA to the detectives on the case in order to rule him out. He agreed that he would give a small sample at the time, but before he did, he said he needed to talk to his lawyer, but instead, he moved to Georgia. Eventually, the police were able to track him down and arrange for them to meet, only for him to once again leave the state. He came up with a very bizarre story later on why he essentially disappeared, and then a short time after that incident, he relocated to Florida. Detectives said every time he would talk to the police, he would come up with other suspects who he believed could be involved, including Alexis's friends and their boyfriends, but they all willingly gave their DNA and cooperated with the investigation. Meanwhile, Tom continued to evade the police, moving every couple of months. That is, until October 2021. The Houston police had gone over every alternative event that they could, ruled out every friend, neighbor, and colleague of the Sharkeys, and they found that the only person who had the means, motive, and opportunity to kill Alexis was Tom. They quietly got an arrest warrant signed, and after determining that he was living in Florida with his daughter, they prepared to take him in. However, things wouldn't go as planned.
This was a lengthy investigation. Our evidence determined that Ms. Sharkey was killed on the night of November 27th, 2020. Her body was found the following morning. The investigation determined that Thomas Sharkey, her husband, is the only person who had the means, motive, and opportunity to have committed the murder. We were able to eliminate other suspects that came up, some of which were brought up by Mr. Sharkey. We established that there was a history of domestic violence between the two of them, and that the relationship was ending, and that there was a pending divorce. There was also clear evidence that Thomas Sharkey had not been truthful about several key issues and statements that he made to police. Over time, we were able to develop enough evidence to have probable cause to get an arrest warrant and to charge him with her murder. An arrest warrant was obtained for Thomas Sharkey on September 29th, 2021. Because of the high-profile nature of the case and because Mr. Sharkey had been evasive with us throughout much of our time, we went very quietly about obtaining the arrest warrant, but the intent was, once he was arrested, to formally charge him in Harris County with her murder. We contacted the Gulf Coast Violent Offenders Task Force to assist us in locating Mr. Sharkey. They developed leads that he was located in Fort Myers, Florida, and they contacted the Marshals Fugitive Task Force in that area. That task force of U.S. Marshals located Mr. Sharkey staying with a relative in Fort Myers at approximately 10 p.m. last night. They were able to make contact and establish that he was inside the residence. Mr. Sharkey avoided them, ran upstairs when he learned that law enforcement was there for him, and he took his own life using a firearm. His identity was confirmed by the relative that was on scene, by the arresting officers who had been looking for him, and by official identification that he had in his possession. The Lee County Sheriff's Office in Florida is conducting the death investigation of Mr. Sharkey. I would like to emphasize that this has been a very tragic series of events for both families, the Robanals and the Sharkeys. They've been through hell, essentially, with the attention of the public on this case. I want to put out there that no one else is suspected of any involvement in the case, and no one else is under investigation in the case. We have clear evidence that Mr. Sharkey acted alone. Both families are composed of innocent people who have been through a lot and are in pain, especially the Sharkeys right now, his family. I would ask that people give both families their privacy and space to grieve. The family of Mr. Sharkey did not know that he was wanted in the case at the time, as we were able to keep the warrant secret. Mr. Sharkey also did not know that he was wanted until last night when he was confronted by law enforcement. And at that point, I'll open it up to any questions.
Can you describe how he was being evasive to authorities?
Well, he left the state not long after the homicide, and especially here recently, detectives made efforts to meet with him in order to collect a DNA sample from him. He agreed to do that. He was living in Georgia at the time, and detectives went to Georgia to try and obtain his DNA sample, and suddenly he no-showed, dropped out of contact, came up with a very bizarre story later on about why he had essentially disappeared. And then a short time after that incident, he relocated to Florida.
When exactly did you request the DNA? When was that supposed to happen in Georgia?
That was supposed to happen, I believe, end of July. Early August of this year. We had been making efforts to get him to meet with us to provide that sample for some time. That was just finally the time that he agreed that a detective could meet him in Georgia to obtain the sample.
So what was the tipping point where you said, this is the person who you believe killed Alexis Sharkey?
There was no one bombshell piece of evidence that suddenly shifted everything in our favor. Like I said, the investigation was very lengthy. There's a lot of different pieces of circumstantial evidence, a lot of things that we had to comb through. Mr. Sharkey's behavior and our conversations with him over time and evolving stories and the ability to disprove stories, that took time, and eventually the mountain of evidence essentially just became high enough.
But did you wait too late?
No.
You don't think you waited too late?
No.
The goal would have been to get him alive, obviously, perhaps.
Of course, but we don't really have any control over his actions in that scenario.
It took almost a year.
Yes, like I said, it was a detailed, lengthy investigation. There was a lot of various theories and conspiracy theories that came up that we had to look into and disprove. There was alternative suspects presented, including people that were presented by Mr. Sharkey that we had to investigate. So no, we weren't able to move on an arrest until we were able to get to a point that we had eliminated sufficiently those other possibilities and built enough evidence to have a case that could not only arrest and charge but convict.
Can you expand on the conspiracy theories? Was this only from Sharkey? Was it from people like on social media?
Yeah, I mean, because of the high-profile nature of the case, there was various tips that come in. There's also, family members that are trying to help, and they provide information from things that they saw on a chat board or, on Instagram. And then, like I said, Mr. Sharkey himself, in his explanation of what happened, provided a suspect description of somebody that he claimed to have seen Ms. Sharkey leaving with.
At age 26, Alexis Sharkey lost her life to murder, strangled. The woman's body left on the side of West Houston Road. Her mother, Stacy Robinette, told me her family always suspected Alexis's husband.
Well, I will admit that we have felt that Tom was guilty of this from pretty much the beginning.
Tom Sharkey died by suicide in Fort Myers, Florida this week as federal agents went to arrest him for his wife's 2020 killing.
Are you surprised that he ended his life?
Yes, I am. I just really thought that it would end with a trial and that he would come in and make his case. and he chose to not go that way.
In a lengthy, honest conversation, Robinault told me from her Pennsylvania home, it's been a painful year.
Loss of life is it's never good. But I do feel like, in a way, he did serve himself justice.
What's even more upsetting, Alexis's family still doesn't have her belongings, including her 3 pets, back.
We begged him for her cats because they were like her children, and we just wanted to have something. Sorry. We just wanted to have something of hers.
Sharkey, who often took to Instagram to share her own life, also shared her love for her cats online. On this IG account, you can see her beloved brown Bengal named Asia and her gray cat named Smokey.
Nothing. It's all gone. It was all taken from the apartment. It was, we asked Tom for it many times, and he would tell us that, I'll get it to you, I'm going through it. And then he ghosted us, and we have no idea where any of it's at.
Robinault said apartment management told her Tom's friends cleaned out the unit shortly after he fled Houston. She'd love to have her daughter's items back, saying it'd be something after such a heartbreaking 10 months.
I'm super sorry for Tom's family. It's just such senseless loss that has happened with my daughter, and then him. I'm just sorry for all of that. It's just beyond. It's been a horrific year.
HPD says this murder case will likely be closed soon, now that Tom Sharkey, the one and only suspect, is dead.
Because Thomas Sharkey killed himself before being taken by the police, the exact events of the night Alexis died are unknown. However, regardless of what happened, Alexis still perished. She was a strong, bright light in her friends' lives, and to this day, her loss is felt. Alexis deserved so much more out of life, and Thomas was forever a coward choosing to die instead of accepting responsibility. If you have made it to this portion of the video, thank you for watching. I will be linking charities in the description box down below if you're interested in donating to any charities relating to the case we discussed. If there's a case you would like to see more attention brought to, feel free to email me at dreading.official@gmail.com.